Welcome to Slash Game Master Prep Time. It is time to get started. As I mentioned, this will be recorded and uploaded to my YouTube channel later. I am going to try to get through the content of my presentation fairly quickly so we can leave a lot of time for questions. So if you want to ask questions, please type them into chat. And we are just going to get rolling. All right, so my name is Matt. Just to introduce myself a little bit. So my name is Matt. I run DiceGeeks.com. I am a writer, dungeon master, role-playing game designer. I create tabletop RPG resource books. I have been running games since I was 9 years old and introduced to Dungeons and Dragons all the way back in the dark ages of the early to mid 1980s. And so I've been running games for a long time. There was also a long stretch where I was a forever GM, where I just ran games pretty much. If I wanted to play a role-playing game, I just had to run, I had to run it. I had to be the game master if I wanted to play. And that lasted for about 20 years or so. So I have been running games for a long time, and I have hopefully some useful ideas and things that we can take away here today. All right, so I'm going to talk about a lot of different ideas about how you can cut down your prep time. If you don't like the idea, don't use it. Okay. I get some feedback on some of the things that I do online. I wrote a little book called The No Prep Game Master. I get some feedback and people are always saying, well, I don't like some of the ideas in it. That's fine. Don't use those. Use the ones you do like. Don't use those ideas. Do something else. But I'm hopefully here to give you just a couple more tools that you can put in your toolkit of when you're the dungeon master, when you're the game master, and you can get some value out of those, these ideas, and just add them into your toolkit and cut down some of the prep time if that's what you need to do, right? I talk to other people, they say, oh, well, I enjoy the prep time. Hey, if you enjoy it, if it's relaxing for you, great. But if not, here's some ways we can cut it down so we can play more, right? So I don't want to hear somebody say we have to cancel because I didn't prep. Okay, that's one thing I don't want to hear. All right, let's be real. All right, I do apologize. This slide kind of looks like a Joel Schumacher Batman film or something, but let's be real for a second, okay? So, I don't have time to prep, okay? And I bet you don't have a lot of time to prep either, all right? Look, you can tell by my gray hair, right? And I assume a lot of people will be in the same situation that I am. I'm married. I have kids. I have to put food on the table. My parent, my father's passed away, but my mother is not getting younger. I have a lot of responsibilities. Okay. I have a lot of responsibilities on my plate. I'm fine with that, but I don't have a lot of time to prep, for a game. If I get to play once a week, if I get 3 hours set aside on a night to play, I don't have 3 hours the night before to prep. Okay. Right. Because that's book solid. That's gone. And so, just kind of keeping these things in mind. Like I said, I'm getting real. I don't mean to be too dark here or anything like that. But we don't have a lot of time for this. When I was 17 and, I was, going to high school and I was watching Star Trek: The Next Generation every night, I could prep. I could spend hours and hours prepping. I can't do that anymore. Okay. And, just some things I've heard recently, right? I don't know, I heard on a podcast, right? It says 1 out of 2 Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 1 out of 2 Americans don't have $1,000 in the bank. 1 out of 3 Americans say they are in financial crisis. I have no idea if those are true, but that was very depressing when I was hearing some of that stuff. So we're not going to have a lot of time to prep. Okay, that's just the way it goes. Especially at certain stages of our life. Okay, we're just not going to have time, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's fine because we want to have a hobby. We want to enjoy. We want a little escape here and there. We want to hang out with our friends, even if it's virtual over a tabletop and our friends are, across the country or across the world. We have the ability to connect with them, and we have, this opportunity to play our hobby. But, like I just mentioned beforehand, what I don't want to hear is like, oh, well, we couldn't play this week because, the game master didn't have time to prep. And I hear that a lot. I've started going to more and more cons. The more and more I've gotten into this, the more and more I write books. I go to more and more conventions, and I hear, oh yeah, well, we haven't been able to play for a few months. Why? Oh, well, the GM, he got a new job, or he got laid off and he's got to do this, or well, she had a baby and she's got to do this. And then, so we just haven't been playing. Okay, well, I don't want to hear that we can't play because we need time to prep. Okay, I want to be able to play. I want to be able to have everybody have their their hobby and enjoy it, instead of it the hobby being something we enjoy. It's something we dread, right? Because I do hear that from game masters, sadly, quite a bit, that it's like, well, I love running the games. I enjoy it, but man, I cannot prep. I just don't have time for this. I feel like I'm not spending time with my family. I feel like I'm doing it's like kind of overtaking a lot of things. I hear that. I don't want to hear that anymore. Right? I don't want people to say that. So I want to try to give you some tools and tips here today that can kind of help us cut down that prep time, kind of, relieve us from some of the stress that sometimes I think probably we're putting on ourselves, because in many cases, right, our players probably don't even care. In many cases, our players are probably just fine, and they think we're doing a great job. We're probably putting a lot of this pressure on ourselves. Although, sometimes maybe, we might also say, my players won't be happy if I switch to a no prep style or a low prep style. I'm not saying, maybe no prep is too much of an exaggeration, but a low prep style. My players won't like that. So if you find yourself saying this, if you say my players won't be happy if I switch to no prep or light prep or something like that, and that is true, I think sometimes we put that pressure on ourselves. We might just be overreacting and think they won't. And they probably 80 or 90% of the time, they're going to be totally fine with it. And especially if we're real with them, right? We just say, hey, got a lot going on. Mom's in the hospital, kids, this, that. People are probably just like, oh, that's fine. No problem. No worries. I'd still like to play this week, but that's no worries. So most of the time people are probably going to be that way. But if your players aren't happy, if you want to go to a lower prep style or a no prep style, ask them to run the game. Ask them to be the dungeon master or the game master. Okay. Just say, okay, well, I'm swamped. I've got to put food on the table. I got to take care of stuff. I don't have time to prep. If you think I'm shortchanging the game, then please, you run the game then. And again, probably 9 times out of 10, if the person doesn't say, oh yeah, well, oh, I can run. If the person just doesn't accept it and say, oh yeah, I can be the dungeon master, they'll probably be like, actually, it's okay. Actually, that if you take, time to go a little bit more no prep, a little bit low prep, hey, that's okay. Because why? They want to play, right? They probably want to play. They're probably not realizing what they're saying. So let's, if you tell your players, hey, I don't have a lot of time to prep this week and I can't do this anymore, but I would still like to run the game, they should be okay with it. And if they're not, they can run the game. Okay. That's just the way it goes. Why? Because we should be all friends, right? We should be friends. We should be able to talk to people like human beings. If you're playing with strangers, maybe, if you initiated the game, well, then maybe they'll quit or whatever, but then the social cost is not big at all, right? It's just somebody you're playing with on Roll20 or whatever, and just say, oh, well, okay, you don't like it. That's fine. My life has changed and I got to do something else. All right. So here, I got a little heavy, so we're going to get a little lighter here. So if players want the GM to be Shakespeare, then the players need to be Patrick Stewart, Michael Caine, Denzel Washington, Michelle Yeoh, and Maggie Smith. All right. So if you want me to be Shakespeare, I'm going to need you to step up your playing, right? And this goes for, if you want me to be Matt Mercer, well, then I'm going to need you to be Laura and Travis. Okay. I am not going to need you to roll in, not know how your character works, be looking at your phone all the time. I'm going to need something else. Okay. Especially if you want me to be Shakespeare. If you just want to show up and have fun and I don't even know what I'm doing and you don't know what you're doing and we're still having fun. Okay. That's the way we play then. But if you want me to be Shakespeare and you're not going to put in any work, then you can run the game. That's just kind of the way it goes. And I wanted to lighten it up a little bit. Obviously, I'm kind of joking around here, but got a little heavy with the kind of the real world stuff there. So I wanted to lighten it up a little bit. Of course, like I said, if we're all friends, this should not be a big deal. And, this kind of assumes something anyway. This kind of assumes if you go to like a no prep or a low prep style game, that means it's bad, which is not the case, right? That's not the case. Because you can spend hours prepping and still run a bad session because you were probably either prepping the wrong things or you don't know how to prep properly, or you froze while you're playing, or your players derailed you during the session or something like that, right? You can still run a bad game even if you prep a ton. And guess what? Even if you don't prep at all, you could still run a good session, okay? I know that seems a little counterintuitive. Obviously, I prepared for this presentation. I made all these slides. I prepared for them. Wouldn't have been as good as if I hadn't have prepped, but I prepped the right things, right? I tried to make sure I prepped the right things, not just saying, man, I spent 6 hours prepping for the session, and then get into the session and all the prep was on the wrong stuff. All the focus was on the wrong things. So these are some ideas here that we're going to get into to try to help us, make our prep time efficient, make it better, cut it down if we need to cut it down, and, make sure we're still maintaining some good sessions while we're taking care of the real world, right? While we're living in the real world. I hope that makes sense to everybody, and I hope that that sounds interesting to people. And we're going to right now just dive into a few different things. All right. All right, let me move this down here. Okay. All right, so think about your campaign. This is something that we're going to start doing with a little bit more purpose, okay? And what I mean here, obviously you could make the argument also, you say, oh, well, I think about doing a good job at something doesn't mean I'm going to do a good job. That's not what I'm talking about. We're going to take some actions, but we're going to spend, instead of spending time, writing down things, instead of spending time, a lot of time looking in books, unless we're enjoying that time and we have the free time, right? If that's enjoyable and you have the, some of that time and it's relaxing to you, go ahead. That's fine. But what here is we're going to think about our campaigns, okay? But we're going to think about them purposefully, right? We're not just going to think about them in some way like, oh no, I got a campaign Tuesday night. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? We don't think about it that way, right? We're going to think about it in kind of start mentally preparing ourselves for things that could happen or things that we want to happen in the session. Okay. And what I'm usually talking about here is, I mentioned some of those dark and gloomy stats that I heard in a podcast just the other day about, how, Americans, with 1 in 3 of us are in financial crisis and all this stuff. But what else? What else we do a lot during the day? We watch, like, the average is pretty close to like 40 hours of some kind of content, right? Either video games, TV, YouTube, something like that. Like 40 hours, right? Like a full-time job. This is what we spend watching some kind of content like that. Okay. So what I'm saying is, while you're just normally going about some of your normal routines, say you're watching Andor, with your family or whatever it is, The Mandalorian or whatever you're watching, or you're watching some movie or some other TV show, um, uh, you know, while you're doing some of that, look at the complications and situations that arise in some of the TV shows, movies, or books that you are currently enjoying, right? Look at some of the situations that happen, look at some of the complications that happen, and think about those, think about how they could be used in your campaign. Now, I'm not saying, run the movie, run the TV show, run the book, although you can do that and it can work. I've seen it done really well, especially if it's obscure and your players haven't heard of that, haven't seen that movie or something. You can get away with it, but that's a little cheat. But you don't have to do that. But what you can do is you can think about what you're doing, and it can be even something that's hugely popular, right? Like some movie or TV show right now that, like, everybody's watching, because what we're doing is we're not running people through Stranger Things, or we're not running people through the Black Panther. We're not running people through, the exact movie or the exact show. We're just going to think about some of the situations, complications, things that we've seen in those movies, books, TV shows, and see how we can use them in our game. And like I said, this is not adding anything new to our plate, really. Like, I'm not saying get out a notebook and write write stuff down while you're watching a movie, with your family or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm saying start to kind of build a mental habit of thinking about the storytelling in whatever media you are watching or reading or engaging with at the time. Okay. Start creating this kind of habits, say, like, what's the storyteller doing here? What was the director doing? What was the writer doing? What were they doing here? What were they doing? So we're going to think about these things as we watch some media, because we're already watching a ton of it. We're already experiencing a ton of it. And I know some of us read a lot, so we can do this with the books that we're reading too. If you're reading, if you're, reading some novels or something, you know, even if you're reading science fiction, but you're running a fantasy campaign, or vice versa, or you're running an urban fantasy vampire thing, but you're reading actually, some, classic, Homer or something like this. You can look at situations and see those in the media that you are working on, and then use those in your games. Like I'm saying, I'm not saying just run this whole movie, run the whole scenario. I'm saying, think about how is the author, storyteller, director, writer here, how are they complicating the situation? What kind of situation are they putting their characters in? And we're going to think about those situations so we can put our player characters in difficult situations, give them challenging situations, right? Like, think about the movie you're watching. Is there a time limit on it? Is there, does the protagonist or the group of characters have to get out of the mansion before morning? Do they, or whatever it is? Do they have to do something before sunrise? Do they have to do they have to accomplish something before the bomb goes off? Little things like that. You're like, oh, I could put a timer on my player characters, and it could just be whatever, and for fantasy, it could be like, oh, well, you have 10 10 rounds until the lab blows up, or, or whatever it is, or, 5 rounds until the Kraken shows up, whatever it is, right? You can get those ideas from the media that you are engaging with. We're not going to run it unless we're really pushed, and we can do that. That's a cheat. That's the cheat. We can just run the book. If your players haven't read a book, just run the book. That's a cheat. But what's not a cheat, but more to help us engage and grow our storytelling, would be to think about the media that we're watching, see how the storyteller is telling the story, think about the campaign. Don't get out a notebook, don't write it down, think about it. Think about, how can I make it challenging for players? What did they do? What did this storyteller do to make it challenging for their protagonist here? What did they do? And just think about it in those terms as we experience media. React to your players. So another one here, right? This is something that I think can be underrated, because, as game masters, sometimes, we want to create these huge worlds. I think a lot of game masters are also novelists, right? We want to be storytellers, or filmmakers, right? We want to be storytellers. We want to tell stories. But in a novel or a film, right, the protagonist is under our control, right? It's under the writers, directors, control. In a role-playing game, right, our protagonists are free agents, right? They're radicals. They're out there. They're going to do stuff. Hopefully, if they're good players. If they're good players, they're active. So if you have a group of players who are active, and who, you set up a scene and they're just like, oh, and they just want to engage with that scene, you can start reacting to them, and you don't have to have much, if anything, planned out just to react to them, right? So, and something like this would be, say, your players are in a port city, right? I don't know, is Baldur's Gate's coming out now, the new video game, right? Okay, so we're going to be in Baldur's Gate. It's port city, you got all this stuff, or you're in wherever, you're in a port city, and you describe the scene. The players are walking along the dock. They're trying to go somewhere to find information, and they're looking for a seedy, a bar that's on the docks somewhere down the wharf, right? And they're walking down there, and you describe the scene, and you say, oh, there's all these merchant ships from around, the whole realm and everything, and they're offloading cargo and stuff, but it's getting to be nighttime, so it's quieting down and people are leaving. And of course, what does one of your players say? Like, I mean, role players, any dungeon master, game master knows what a player is going to say, right? They're going to say, can I sneak on board one of the ships and steal some of that cargo? Now, you can react in a couple ways, right? You can say, no, I wanted you to go to this bar and get information on the bounty or whatever you're looking for, or to find the ring the wizard asked you to get, or whatever it is, or to find the map to the secret herb that'll give you the potion to heal the princess, or whatever it is. So you could say, no, that's not what we're doing right now. I was just explaining a scene to you. The bar is just down the way. Well, now you've locked yourself into a weird situation, right? So we don't want to do that as a game master or a dungeon master. If we're going to describe a scene, we have to have the ability for a player to take initiative and to do something. Now, this is also a little bit of a hack here. If you haven't prepped, or you have low prep, or you know a little bit of something about your world, like, oh, they could find some information at this tavern, but you're open and you're kind of free with things, and you describe a scene, and you describe it in such a way that there are all kinds of things happening around them. Well, when your player says, ooh, can we sneak on board one of those ships and ransack the hold and see if we can find some rare spices and silks that we can sell, so we can buy that, that cool uncommon magic item they've been, I've been eyeing in the in the handbook or whatever. This is a perfect opportunity for you to right now fill a session that you haven't thought about, right? This player, and if the other players agree, right? This player just gave you a whole session, right? They just gave you the whole session. So we could react to them and say, oh yeah, you can try to sneak on board. You can try to sneak on board, sure. But what are we going to do, right? We're not going to make it easy. All right. 2002 throwback. All right. We're going to give them complications, right? We're going to give them complications. We're not going to say, okay, well, yeah, you just walk on board a ship and ransack the hold and get all kinds of gold and silver and spices and silks and everything, and then you can sell it and then you can buy a thing. We're not going to do that, right? We're going to give them complications, right? We're going to say, oh, well, the ship you picked is, it's not moored properly. And so every 30 seconds, it's like 16 feet away from the dock. And then it comes back up to the dock and then it moves again every 30 seconds. So you got to figure out how you're going to time that jump. Oh, wait, there's guards on deck. Walking around in patrol. Oh, if you get past the guards down in the cargo hold, there's, a cabin boy sweeping it out and he's right next to the entranceway to your cargo hold, right? We're going to throw complications at our players, right? We're going to throw complications at them, to make it difficult so they don't just waltz through everything. So if we're going to react to our players and we're going to give them a lot of agency, that makes the player feel good. But we're not going to make it a cakewalk, right? We're going to make this complicated. We're going to give them trouble. We're going to give them obstacles to come across, right? And a lot of these I just thought of, kind of offhand here, while I'm giving the presentation. Where do I get some of these things? Where a guard on deck, cabin boy standing in front of the door, that comes from movie and books and TV shows, right? That I've seen. Nobody could pinpoint which one I'm talking about, but those are just kind of common complications that you find in different kind of stories and things that you hear, right? That we experience. So we're going to throw them complications and we're going to make it complicated, right? We're going to make, if we're reacting to the players, we're going to make it complicated. We're going to throw monsters at them. We're going to throw different things at them. We're going to have guards. We're going to make it dark. We're going to make it whatever. We're going to make them have to jump to grab a hold of the ship. We're going to have to make them swim in dark water where it's dangerous and they don't know what's down there, under the water. We're going to make them do all kinds of things, right, to get on that ship and to steal some silks or some rare spices or whatever. We're going to make it as hard as we can so they're having fun. Right now, they might complain about it being complicated, but if it was easy, nobody'd have fun, right? And this also right here, like I've said before, like this just gave you an entire session. That player saying, oh, I want to sneak on board that ship and steal some silk, just gave you an entire session that can be a lot of fun. And as the new people are joining, they're wondering why in the heck I have Avril Lavigne on the screen. Thank you for joining. But we're going to make this complicated. And the player just gave you a session. You're going to make it complicated so it's fun and you are all going to have a good time. And you didn't have to spend a lot of time prepping this, because having guards be on ships, having, maybe some drunken sailors, in the cargo hold playing cards or something, those are, not difficult things to think of on the fly, right? So we can do that. And we just have a session, even if you hadn't planned anything, right? So we can build a session just by giving our players a scene. So we think about a seaport, we describe it to them, take 5 minutes. At the beginning of the session, describe them the scene. And if you have active players, they could say something and you have an entire session that you didn't plan for and you can all have fun with, okay? Maps. Maps are great, right? So another way we can kind of cut down our prep time is if, we have 3 hours to play, but we don't have 3 hours any time during the week. What we can do is take 5, 10, 15 minutes right before the session. If we can block that time out, say, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to, fire up Roll20. I'm going to make sure I have my stuff, but I'm going to give myself 10 minutes, 15 minutes before my players arrive. You can do a lot of prep in that time, right? You can do a lot of prep. Maps are another good way, right? You can grab a map, right? We can grab a map and just start making up stuff about the map, right? And you can grab a map from anywhere. All right. And somebody just let in chat says they're having video problems. I will be recording this and I will be posting it later, probably this evening, to my YouTube channel. I'll drop a link in the chat or the message box on Gen Con online for the seminar. So there will be a video link to this later. So as I was saying, like, we can take a map and we can just start looking at this map and start thinking of some ideas. And hopefully we're training our mind to think about stories and to think about, we're watching TV shows, we're watching movies, and we're thinking about complications. We're thinking about different situations to put our players in. When we look at a map like this is kind of an odd dungeon here. Grab this map 10, 15 minutes before session. Start thinking about it. Look around at it. Where can we place stuff? What could we do? What would be fun? Why is it so big? Ask yourself these questions, right? Where's the entrance? I see 2 possible places for an entrance and exit over here. Why is it so big? Are there supports in there? Is this like, what is this place? Start asking yourself questions about it in a map, whether it's a city map, a dungeon map, or a map of a spaceport, anything like that. It could be an old map, like you can pull a map from Cyberpunk 2020 back in the day from 89, and you can use it in Cyberpunk Red, right? Because maps are maps. You can just use it. It doesn't care what edition it is. It doesn't care what game it is, really, right? You can even use real maps in some cases. You can use a real map of a country, take a real map of France and turn it upside down, and you could use that as a map, or turn it sideways or something. You could use that as a map. Like, you can do a lot of things with a map, and a map will help you get some of your creativity going and think about it, so you don't have to kind of create some things from whole cloth, right? You can use a bit of this. You can use this little aid here, a map, somebody else already created, and kind of help you aid your creativity and add into it. You can start putting secret rooms in places. You could start doing that. And this is just in a few minutes of time, right? Just a few minutes, because the hard work, the map's already done. Now you're going to fill it with some fun stuff, right? The fun stuff we all like to do, right? The monsters, the hidden rooms, the traps, some of the secret stuff, all the cool fun stuff that we can, that we enjoy. Let somebody else do the hard work. We can fill it with some fun stuff, or at least get an idea of what's going on, and then that way we can react to our players. What if they don't go into the dungeon, right? I don't want to prep a dungeon if they're not going to go into a dungeon, right? I want to be able to know my players are going to interact with a lot of this stuff that I'm going to create. I don't want to spend time creating and then realize they, like my Port City one, I don't want to create that tavern and all the information about their contact and a bounty if they just want to rob a ship, right? I want to have, I want to be able to have freedom for the players to have agency. And I also don't want to prep a lot if they're not going to touch it, right? If they're not going to see it, if they're not going to touch it or engage with it. Maybe I can use it later. Maybe you can repurpose it. There is always that. But, I don't want to create a lot of stuff and then realize the whole campaign is switched to, now they robbed the hold. Now they're going to steal the ship. And, now they want to be pirates. And I thought they were going to be, urban bounty hunters in Baldur's Gate or Waterdeep or whatever the cities are. So there is that one. All right, here's another one. I know some people don't like this. This one usually gets some flack. ask your players questions. Ask your players questions, okay? So some game masters and dungeon masters don't like this because this allows the players to kind of really affect the world in some cases. Some players don't like it because they don't want to necessarily create things. They want to experience a world that somebody else created. And so, but this one is one that I like, and it took me far too long to realize that, I like to think I'm creative, right? I come up with a lot of stuff. I like to think I'm creative when I run games, but the people sitting around the table are creative too, right? My players are really creative people. A lot of them are writing novels on the side. A lot of them are, writing short stories. A lot of them are, are really involved with storytelling in some way. And so I'm like, oh, well, they're creative too. I could ask them questions. If your players, right, if they keep asking you all kinds of questions, even down to, is the door locked, right? You need a way to answer those without derailing your session and without prepping for some of those, those questions. Because number one, we cannot anticipate what they are going to ask, right? So you describe a port city, continuing my metaphor, you describe a port city and the ship's out in the harbor, and then one of your players says, "What, is there an island out in the bay?" And you're like, I have no idea, right? Like, I don't know. I don't know. I didn't think of that. I didn't think of putting an island out there. So you can say no, and then a player is shut down who might have had a good idea. You can say yes, but then what's the problem? You got to create an island, right? So you got to create an island, right? So ask your players. Say, okay, so you don't want to shut them down and say, oh, is there an island out there? Yeah, there's an island out there. Oh, the player is going to say, what's on it? Say, well, you tell me. The game master is just going to say, yeah, you tell me. Tell me what's on it. Tell me what's on that island. And you can kind of temper that if they want to go crazy, if it doesn't fit into your world, if you're running your own world and it doesn't fit in exactly, you can kind of say something like, okay, I see where you're going. Yeah, there is a garrison out there for some, for where some troops are stationed, but it's not exactly like you said, it's this. And they're going to give you ideas. And once we have ideas to start building off of, this just goes, right? Because what is the worst thing is like a blank slate when everybody's staring at you and nobody knows what to say. Once you start getting ideas going, prep handles itself a lot of times. The session starts growing and things start rolling, right? So we're going to ask our players questions. And somebody in chat did say, hey, there are other games that are kind of built for this. Of course, there are other games that just kind of build this into the system, but you can do this in D&D as well, right? This is not like D&D. In D&D, you don't ask your players questions. That's ridiculous. Of course you can ask your players questions in D&D, right? And then you temper it as the game master. You say, okay, no, that'll break the game. I'm not doing that. We'll do this. Yes, but okay, I'm going to change that. And, and you just kind of go with it. And you let them have a creation process in there. And as the person mentioned in chat as well, this creates a bond between the players and the dungeon master or the game master. And if your players feel like they have some say in the world, usually 9 times out of 10, they are then yours, right? They are with you. They are in this campaign. They're going to be active and good players because they don't feel like things are just getting shoved down their throat all the time. Okay. Now there's the odd player out who's like, I just want to be fed. But I find it more often than not, the players want to have some creation. They will feel more connected to the world, more connected to your campaign if you just start asking them some questions sometimes, and they have some freedom there. Now, like I said, we're going to temper it. We're going to do some things. We're going to make sure things are still complicated. We're not going to just wave away things and the treasury's unguarded for no reason or something like that. We're going to give them complications. We're not going to allow them to create things that would just end the campaign or something like that. And they would have to understand that as well. So, but we're going to ask them questions. So if you come into a session, you haven't prepped, or you're light on prep, and you don't know the answer for some things that your players are asking, if you don't know those answers for those questions, ask them. Say, okay, you're asking about, who's the ruler of the city? Okay. And you haven't thought about it. You weren't even thinking about it. You don't care too much. Say, okay, who's the ruler of the city? See what the player says, and then temper it with what fits the world that you're in. And I think you'll find out that your world will take on kind of a new piece, a new dynamic piece. And your game mastering honestly becomes way easier. Sadly, it took me too long to realize this. I was, in the old school model kind of for a long time, where I thought the game master just had to come with everything. And I think I stumbled on it one day when the caffeine wasn't working anymore. The Mountain Dew, after the 7th 2-liter of Mountain Dew, the caffeine is not working anymore. And I was just like, what do you think is over there? And my player spun out this yarn, and I was just like, oh, right, you're super creative. You're super creative because you want to play role-playing games too. This is great. let's do this more and take some pressure off me. All right. So ask your players questions, use them as a resource. If they're cool players, if they're good players, they're going to have a lot of ideas. All right, some random tables. Now, I'm not going to go into this too much because I do create random tables. I got into creating random tables because I wanted random tables to help in my games because I couldn't prep anymore. So random tables can help you fill rooms with random details, so you don't have to prep, right? I don't want a dungeon master spending 3 hours the night before a session figuring out what is in every piece of furniture or whatever in every room in the dungeon. Let's just go, okay, the ring that leads you to the kidnapped Duke is in the room. Sure, I'm going to put that in the room. But when all, 5 other players say, I searched the room, roll on a random table. They don't have to be tables that enrich players, that give out, legendary magic items to level 3 players, or, characters or whatever like that. It can just be stuff, right? It can just be stuff. It can just be, you find a candelabra. Okay. You found a candelabra. Oh, you found a dead rat in the corner. Oh, you found 2 gold pieces. Oh, you found a copper piece. It can just be stuff like that. And they'll help you immensely. I think they can help you immensely. You can even get the quests and stories from random tables as well, if you don't even have time to do any of that. So like I said, I do make them, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. I want to give you some more ideas that can be helpful. All right. And we are coming down to about question time. All right, so here is one that is very, very honest, right? This is it should be, or not honest, it should be obvious, right? Should be obvious. Run sessions without prepping. So, otherwise known as the deep end method, right? throw yourself into the deep end. Okay. You had a busy week, you didn't get to prep for the session, but if you've already been playing for a while, or you've been running games for a long time, you probably know kind of where you're going. You kind of, if you've been playing for a while, what situations your players are already facing. If you're starting a new campaign, this is a great time to have the players add to the world a little bit more, give them some creativity into the world, so they can feel more engaged with the setting and things like that. But just do it without prepping, right? This is how I kind of got started. I had some friends who were like, hey, do you want to like play a role-playing game, on Saturday? And they were like hitting around and you're like, sure. You want me to run, don't you? And they were like, well, yeah, we want you to run it. And it's just like, well, I'm not going to have time to prep. I'm not going to have time to even think of what we're doing. And the players were just like, who cares? We just want to play. And so I was like, all right, well, I'm swamped at work. I'm going to be working a lot and I'll just show up and we'll just play, right? No, nobody's going to be, nobody thinks this is going to be some big epic thing. Nobody's going to get crazy. Nobody's, and they were like, that's fine. Let's just play. It's totally fine. Let's just play. And that to me was kind of a revelation when, this happened, 15 or more years ago. That was just kind of actually more, maybe more than that. That was just a revelation to me, right? It was like, oh, you just want to play and have fun. And if I'm not the best game master today, you don't care because you just want to have fun. And it was like, yeah, that's right. And so it was just like, okay, well, I'm just going to show up. We're just going to pull out the game, get some characters going, and I'm just going to try to run something. And you know what? The session went well. My players were engaged. I started doing a lot of these things, started asking them questions, started, just reaching back in my mind, thinking about situations, complications that I could hit them with and make things, fun. And they may be sitting in the, at the table going, oh, that was kind of like what happened in that one James Bond movie, but not exactly. And you're like, yeah, it was. But we're in Star Wars and nobody cares, or we're in D&D, but yeah, it was kind of like what happened in one Mission Impossible movie, but nobody's saying like I'm running Mission Impossible, but they're like, oh, that was kind of like what happened there. And we're just all playing, right? So run some sessions without prep, right? Because like I said at the beginning, I don't want to hear people say, well, we didn't get to play this week because, Sally couldn't prep, or, Kyle couldn't prep this week. So, their job's busy or whatever. Um, you know so we just can't play. I don't want to hear that. I don't want to hear stuff like that, right? I want to hear, yeah, we played, and she or he was willing to run the game anyway, and we just know that their life is hectic, but we want to still enjoy our hobby, and we're I'm not going to be on anybody's case if they didn't have time to look over every single stat block and read every single page of of anything, of the Curse of Strahd campaign book or something. I'm not going to get on their case, right? So I mean, obviously a lot of our personal problems and a lot of our gaming problems can be solved if we just calm down, right? Like if we just calm down, realize our game master has a lot of stress, in their personal life and a lot of things they got to do, realize our players have the same things. And that if we enjoy this if we enjoy playing this hobby, that we can just come together and have fun. And it doesn't mean it has to be a bad session if you don't prep. Some of my best sessions I've run are without prep. And you could argue that since I've been running games since I was 9 years old, that is all prep, right? I've been doing reps, right? So if I start a new campaign, I'm not starting at zero, right? I have some reps in my back pocket. I remember when I was the jerk GM. I remember when I was the bitter GM. I remember when I was the pushover GM. I remember when I was the whatever GM, right? I remember when I made horrible mistakes. I remember when I did stuff that wasn't fun. I remember all those, and I can start, ahead. I can leap ahead of somebody else because I have some reps. So get some reps in, run a lot of games, run some sessions without prepping, prep for only 5, 10, 15 minutes before the session. Just do some things like that. I don't want to hear we can't role play because, the DM couldn't prep. I don't want to hear that. Okay. I want to hear, oh my gosh, we got together and played Tuesday night and it was awesome. That's what I want to hear. All right. So, that is the content that I had there. We have about 11 minutes or so for any questions or comments in that, please type them in the chat. I see a few in chat, just kind of reinforcing a few things that I had said. All right, somebody says they got to go. Awesome. And yes, it will be recorded. It will be recorded, and I will post it on my YouTube. So any other questions? I know sometimes, I don't mean to get dark on people, and I don't sound like I'm complaining. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining either. I love running games, but I think there were a lot of times when I put a lot of pressure on myself when it wasn't needed, right? And I think a lot of people leave the hobby. They leave the hobby because they're like, well, when am I going to prep all the time? It takes me 3 hours to prep. It takes me 4 hours to make a character. Well, you do that stuff in a session. You do that stuff when you're all together. You get it going, and you don't have to put any questions. Did I say anything that was heresy or that you want to stone me for? We got about 9 minutes left. Please type some questions into chat. Again, I have everybody muted. It makes things less chaotic. Please ask me some questions. Do you have any struggles with your games? Have you found, like low prepping or no prepping? Have you tried it? Have you not tried it? Do you prep a lot? Please, I'd love to hear from you. Still have a lot of people, a number of people still hanging on. So I'd love to hear some people's thoughts. Did I say anything that was off base or that needs to be corrected? I am certainly willing to admit that I don't know everything about the craft, and I am still trying to learn how to be a better game master every time I run a session. Every time I play a session too, right? I'm always watching what the game master's doing and how I'm playing my characters, how I can be a good player, how I can help the game master. And also, what does this game master do that I don't do, that I can do well? Does that make sense to everybody? Does anybody have any questions? All right. So somebody says, the only thing I play is no prep, no stat blocks because I lock up too much. But I wish I had the capacity to run 5e. Yeah, I understand what you're saying there. A lot of people, the stat blocks with 5e kind of can get overwhelming. Some games are obviously in their design, they're made not to include tons of stat blocks. They're made for this. But like I said, with 5e, you can do it. It's all up to you, if you want to, right? So you can ask your players questions. There's nothing in the rules that say the dungeon master cannot ask their players for questions. And then also there are some tools. There is a website called Cobalt Fight Club, I think, where you can just type in 4 players level 3, give me a deadly encounter, and it will give you creatures, right? It will give you creatures right there. So if you just have a laptop or you're on your computer while you're running your game, you can just pull those up. You got the stat blocks right there. Also, rely on your players. A lot of the players in 5e, a lot of the players have read the monster manual. Ask them. Say, how many hit points does a Kraken have? There's always one guy or one girl sitting at the table who's like, oh, they have this many, because it's like I read them before. So always ask your players. They probably know some of the stat blocks better. Somebody asked, is there a lot of random cards, images, actions we can use to have a database of things that we can just pop out? Sure. You can kind of, you can kind of build your file if you want. If you want to build a file like that, I usually say keep it in your mind, right? Keep that little card in your mind. Now, if you're building a campaign and you have a night, where you're free and you want to enjoy some stuff, you can build something like that. Or during the session, which actually is what I would recommend. If you want a picture for an NPC while you're at the table, just Google it right there at the table, pull it up while somebody's doing an attack or something, and just, get that image up and get it out on the table. Yeah, and then there was a clarification. Love 5e, just can't run it. Yeah, I get it. Get some thank yous for the panel. I thank you for coming. Somebody says there's an excellent resource for free maps. It's 2-minute tabletop, 2-minute. That's the numeral 2minute tabletop.com. Never heard of that one. I'm gonna have to check that one out. Yeah, suggested book, Lazy Dungeon Master by Mike Shea. Absolutely a popular one. Some people saying thank you. Again, I thank you. Thank you so much. Somebody says, thank you for the panel. I'm trying to move away from over prep, but I find there's stuff that I need to prep, mostly learning what I need to prep, don't need to prep. Find random tables help me. But then I have to juggle random tables. Haha, where is the table for this? Yeah, that is true. You do kind of find yourself sometimes juggling resources. I get it. I absolutely get that. You do find yourself sometimes juggling resources, so that can be a problem. But I think what this person said here, who was this, Trevor, I think what you said here at the beginning was really good. You find out what you need to prep and what you don't need to prep, right? I think we spend a lot of time, we spend a lot of time prepping for things that we just don't need, right? We spend a lot of time prepping, we don't need it, right? We just don't need it. And we lock ourselves into this thing where we have all this stuff and we spend a couple hours and then our players don't even do anything with it. And you're just like, oh, why did I spend time on this? I should have spent time with my kids. They were asking me a question. I should have listened to them instead of prepping something that nobody listened to. So that's the situation I find myself in sometimes. So finding out what you need to prep and what you don't need to prep is a very good point, Trevor. Thank you for bringing that up. Absolutely. And then juggling resources. Hey, you just got to juggle resources sometimes, and we can work out a system for that. Try it live, right? The deep end, try to juggle some random tables while you're playing, and hopefully you'll figure out a really good system for it. All right, we just have a couple minutes, maybe like 2-3 minutes left. Anybody want to sneak in a question at the last minute? I would love to answer another one. Thank you as well. I really appreciate your time. I tried to put a lot of thought into this, so I hope people could see that. I take this seriously. I take your time seriously too. Somebody says, thing I love is books of layers and encounters. Yes. Yes, you know, if you can find some of these resource books that just say, here's an encounter, 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 and you can just kind of drop them in right where you're going, right where you're playing. Absolutely. There's a lot of good resources, books like that. And of course, some people have mentioned some of them in the chat, Mike Shea and, Sly Flourish and some Goodman Games puts out a lot of stuff. I'm probably forgetting a ton. There's tons of other game companies and writers and individual creators that put out stuff. So you can just drop them right into your game, right into your session. Yep. And then somebody else says DM's Guild, Pathfinder Infinite has tons of third-party stuff. Absolutely. Look for what you're doing. Look for something. Some of it's free. Oh, Cobalt Press. Yeah, Cobalt Press. Absolutely. The guys, the people at Cobalt Press have put together tons and tons of really cool resources that you can just grab and go, right? Ton of stuff nowadays is free, right? You can just grab a ton of stuff, skim it, and have ideas for your session without, doing a 5-hour 6-hour prep time or during the week and then trying to play your game. You can just grab a few PDFs, grab some resources, skim through them, look for interesting situations, let them spark your creativity as well, and then just kind of unleash your imagination and unleash the creativity of your players as well. All right, well, we are about down to time here. It is about finished. I thank you so much for coming today. Like I said, I really do appreciate your time. And I thank you so much for hanging out right now. Again, I have recorded this. I'll be uploading it to my YouTube channel. I'll drop a link in the Gen Con online messaging for this seminar. I thank you so much. I want everybody to run awesome games. So I'll see some of you in the next seminar. Thank you so much.